Hello there, I'm Billy Grant, the author of the two books behind me there. The one who shows the way, evolving humanity from psychological to psycho-spiritual living. And the essence of what I'm saying there is that we're far too caught up in our heads and our logic and reason these days. And then the second book, which is My Christianity, a Christianity for the 21st century, actually is a rollover from that first book and comes about because I've kind of always been able to see that there's something to Christianity, but I don't kind of get and agree with what I see going on out there in society in the name of Christianity. So when most people kind of find out that I've written a couple of books and find out they're about Christianity, they tend to presume that I'm singing the same song as most people that are calling themselves Christians and writing about Christianity, when that's actually not the case at all. I'm kind of challenging Christianity and saying that it's doing one thing, but it's kind of lost its way a little bit, is what I'm suggesting. And I'm offering a different perception of that. And that's why I thought it might be better to make these videos rather than leave people to jump to their own conclusions. A lot of people are happier to sit and listen to a video and maybe do something in the background, and then if it resonates with them, perhaps go out and buy the books. The books are actually very cheap, the whole point being to get this message out there. So what I want to do is just make a few videos, maybe 10 minutes long, to introduce you to myself, what I'm about, and read bits of the book so that you can get a feel for what it is that I'm actually trying to say. So I'm going to start with this second book, My Christianity, the Christianity for the 21st century. And what that's about, as I say, is me seeing a Christianity that for me is a bit, how can I put this, a bit infantile, I would say. And a lot of people are going through life still caught up in their perceptions of Christianity from childhood, or rejecting Christianity because of the perceptions from childhood, and don't actually get a chance to stop and look at it and take on a more adult perspective. They tend to stick with where they were, kind of what their last perceptions of Christianity were, whether it worked for them or didn't work for them, whether it was part of their childhood or not. So the book starts with why I wrote this book. Okay, so this book is not about trying to get you to become a Christian, especially if your own inner spiritual guidance has already rejected it. And that summarises everything that I'm actually saying here, because that is your spiritual guidance. So I'm just going to read that bit again. This book is not about trying to get you to become a Christian, especially if your own inner spiritual guidance has already rejected it. It's about helping you to see the baby that was thrown out with the bathwater, when most of our society rejected a tainted and impure Christianity. So again, I'm saying there's something pure in there that's been thrown out with the bathwater, and in reality it's the bit that's pure that's in it that's guided us to reject it in the first place, as I see it. This book is actually a bit of an aftermath of writing book one, the one who shows the way, evolving humanity from psychological to psycho-spiritual living. This is because book one was really a spontaneous writing episode to integrate all that I had been through and learned since having a midlife crisis and spiritual awakening 12 years ago. That first book culminating in the realisation that there is a holistic guidance or Holy Spirit, call it what you will, that is alive and guides us in life. And again, just as Jesus said there was. My Christianity, a Christianity for the 21st century, is then a further explanation, expansion, and demonstration of what I concluded in book one. So again, whilst I'm saying I'm kind of challenging Christianity a bit, I'm also saying that there is something holistic and guiding in life that is there for us. But I'm also saying that I can see that there is something of value in the teachings of Jesus, even though I don't entirely agree with all of the kind of Jesus story that's in the Bible. So that's the opening bit there. I therefore wrote this book to evidence the reality of this living guidance. So to evidence it, okay? because it's very active in both books actually, this guidance. I therefore wrote this book to evidence the reality of this guidance because Christianity doesn't do that. It tries to convince us to be Christian by believing in 2,000-year-old stories, instead of evidencing its teachings as being real and alive in every moment. The book starts off by exposing how we actually behave in a more Christian way than we realise, despite what we tell ourselves we believe and don't believe. Now, to pause there, this again is a kind of primary part of the book, in the sense that, as I was saying, book 1 is about evolving us from psychological to psycho-spiritual functioning. And what I'm saying is that we, the sole essential being that we are now functioning in a society, living in a society where it's all academic and it's all about rational and reason, logic, thought, etc. So we're being run by reason, logic and thought instead of being run by the spirit. So we're functioning psychologically instead of psycho-spiritually, which is more to do with what we sense and what we feel in each other's presence, rather than being in our ego, which functions psychologically because of its disconnect, and functions childishly, defensively, reactively, etc. Prioritising number 1 here. So where was I shouldn't do this stopping. I'm going to read that again, given what I've just said. I therefore wrote this book to evidence the reality of this living guidance because Christianity doesn't do that. It tries to convince us to be Christian by believing in 2,000-year-old stories instead of evidencing its teachings as being real and alive in every moment. The book starts off by exposing how we actually behave in a more Christian way than we realise, despite what we tell ourselves we believe and don't believe. It then exposes several situations and dilemmas that I found myself in over a period of months, whereby, as my spiritual practice, I tried to behave more Christian than I otherwise would have. It then moves on to inviting you to reconsider what Christianity really is and how it can serve you if you can get past your childhood mindsets, the evil that impure religion does in the world, and the misunderstood teachings of what it is about. This then offers us all a way out of our current lack of understanding and the consequential global demise. Because not only am I suggesting, I'm just scrolling down here, not only am I suggesting that we're all living in that divine disconnect, that disconnect from source, from spiritual guidance, we are also collectively living disconnected from it. And that's why we're seeing all sorts of systems collapsing. So not only are we seeing individuals that don't have any sense of purpose, meaning and value in life, especially a spiritual sense of purpose, meaning and value. A lot of people have a materialistic sense of purpose, meaning and value, but we end up outgrowing that eventually if we're successful. But we've also then, as I'm suggesting, got institutions, the church, politics, law, education, housing, NHS, lots of systems that are beginning to fail because there isn't the vertical connection. It's all just on the horizontal. So the next part in the book is why you should read this book. Because if you're looking at this kind of book, then you are probably searching for answers and perhaps a greater sense of purpose, meaning and value in your life than you presently have. So perhaps the reason that you should read this book is because it could save you from searching for the rest of your life and not finding an answer that contents your soul and its meaning of life searching now that it is awake. Having dedicated the past 13 years of my life to searching for a more spiritual sense of purpose, meaning and value for the sake of my sanity and soul's contentment, I am now no longer searching. Instead, I am practicing, applying and teaching my newfound spiritual practice. This practice involves being conscious and present to my thoughts and behaviours as I go about my daily life and interact with others, and are centred on my personal interpretation of Christianity and the teachings of Jesus. This practice then following those teachings, but also following the guidance of the Holy Spirit that is within and out with us. So we have a guidance within us, and women tend to be more in touch with us than men. Men tend to be more in their head, women are more in their emotions, their feelings, etc. And we'll talk about gut instinct and just having that, there's something wrong here. And what I'm partly saying in this book is that how can I put this to summarise it? What if that is an embodied spiritual guidance rather than just what we're saying, gut instinct? And what if we're not offering credit to the right place vertically because we're functioning egoically and keeping the credit to ourselves? Because the ego always wants to esteem us. And so we take the credit. I have just realised this. I have just realised that. I have just had this thought. When sometimes we actually haven't done something. Something has come to us. But we don't tend to see it because we're not functioning as we should be. And so I'm saying that guidance is out with and within us, embodied. So this guidance, it guides me by how I feel and what I sense in myself and others as we interact. And it steers me by feeling either clean or defiled in my embodied spirit. So again, that's what I was talking about. You feel, something's just not right. Or something could be amazing. And it's a feeling that we get. It gives me revelations. So again, what I was talking about a moment ago. When it can get past my busy mind and it helps me see the awe and wonder of life. It has opened me to seeing everything in a whole new light and a whole new way of functioning, and is always there when I remember to reach out to it. If this sounds like a way of living, because that's really what I'm offering here, that appeals to you, then that is why you should read this book. This way of Jesus being in contrast to living in spiritual disconnect and lack of spiritual guidance, floundering along in psychological coping mechanisms and materialistic gratification, desperately trying to fill that void with things like food, drugs, alcohol, sex, television, even just having arguments, anything that will trigger and stimulate us. So it's trying to get stimulated. Either that or living a life of numbness and desperation to cope with spiritual disconnect. So again, there are lots of people that would rather be numb. A lot of people are actually so sensitive that they have to numb themselves down because they feel too much. And some of these people are being diagnosed as depressed. When to me they're not depressed, I can sense and feel somebody that's depressed by using the same kind of guidance, spiritual discernment, kind of truth monitor that exists within us. You know when you're in the presence of somebody that's depressed, compared with being in the presence of people that have been told that they are depressed. If you were in the presence of somebody that's really depressed, and people that are going around saying they're depressed, you would know the difference, I can assure you. So to me, they are depressed, but they're not depressed. And when I'm saying people that are not depressed, it's like being a spring where you're alive and bouncy and vibrant in life, but because life's flat and heavy and you're not connected to the vitality of life, you're spiritually disconnected, you feel like that spring is depressed, it's crushed, it's lifeless. So in a sense, it's kind of depressed, but it's not what's actually meant by depression. It's more to do with spiritual disconnect, in my opinion. Now, before I end this, I'll maybe read the introduction tomorrow. I just want to say that I justify myself in talking about this stuff and writing this stuff because when I went into midlife crisis in about 2004, I ended up realising this guidance was there. And eventually, once I stopped fighting it and started following it, it eventually led me to start doing a master's degree in London in psychospiritual psychology at the Institute of Psychosynthesis in Hendon. And so I trained there for about 5 years, up and down to London 13 times a year over the academic season. And then I went on to do other trainings. I've done Theta and Reiki and various things. Probably the other main one being heart intelligence training, being my main training. So whilst I'm offering all of this from my personal journey and personal experience, I'm also offering it from the academic training and qualifications that I have that validate me and justify me in saying that I believe I have the right to offer what I'm offering. But in truth, above and beyond the trainings, again, it comes back to that inner knowing. When it's that way when you know, and you almost wish you didn't know on occasions. So I'm going to end this video here and just check it, and if it's okay, I'll post it up, and then tomorrow I might offer the introduction to take you further into what it is that I'm beginning to talk about.